"You picked the wrong passenger to bully today," the federal agent said, his badge gleaming under the cabin lights. Most people think the scariest part of flying is the turbulence. For 14-year-old Lucas, it wasn't the air pockets that terrified him. It was the crew of Flight 402. They laughed when he boarded. They sneered when he took his first-class seat. And when they called the police to drag him off before takeoff, they thought they had won. But they didn't know who Lucas was texting, or that an FAA investigation had been launched before the cabin doors even closed. Watch carefully, because the karma that hits this crew isn't just satisfying, it's federal. The humid air of Miami International Airport, MY, smelled of jet fuel and overpriced coffee. For most travelers, it was just another Tuesday of stress and long lines. But for Lucas Jackson, a 14-year-old boy with a crisp fade haircut and a backpack that looked slightly too big for his slender frame, it was the best day of his life. Lucas wasn't just a passenger, he was an aviation prodigy. He could distinguish a Boeing 737 MAX from an Airbus A320 just by the shape of the winglets. He spent his weekends building scale models and his weeknights on flight simulators. Today he was flying alone to Denver for the National Young Aviators Summit, a prestigious scholarship program he'd fought tooth and nail to get into. But the real cherry on top: the upgrade. His father, a hard-working mechanic named David, who had saved for months for this trip, had used every single frequent flyer mile he'd hoarded over 2 decades to bump Lucas from economy to first class. "You worked hard for this scholarship, son," David had told him at the curb, checking Lucas's tie for the 3rd time. "You sit up front. You fly like the king you're gonna be." Lucas clutched his boarding pass like it was a winning lottery ticket. Seat 3A. He approached the gate for American Eagle Airways, a fictional regional carrier. But let's say Flight 402 was operated by a mainline partner to raise the stakes. The gate agent, a tired-looking woman named Sarah, scanned his pass. She paused, looking at the first-class designation, then down at Lucas's sneakers and hoodie. "You're in 3A?" she asked, her eyebrow arching. "Yes, ma'am," Lucas said, smiling politely. "My dad upgraded me." She didn't smile back. She just grunted and waved him through. "Boarding Group 1 only right now. Don't block the lane if you aren't Group 1. "I am Group 1, ma'am." Lucas pointed to the bold number on his ticket. She snatched the ticket, squinted at it, and then thrust it back at him. "Go." Lucas shook off the cold reception. "Nothing is going to ruin this," he told himself. He walked down the jet bridge, the excitement bubbling in his chest. He was about to turn left instead of right. He was about to experience the wide seats and the warm nuts and the respect that came with the front of the plane. He stepped onto the aircraft. Standing in the galley were 2 flight attendants. One was a tall man with slicked-back blonde hair, whose name tag read Chad. The other was the purser, a woman in her late 40s with a tight bun and a face that looked like it had forgotten how to smile years ago. Her name tag read Brenna. They were laughing about something, a loud, cackling laugh that stopped abruptly when Lucas stepped aboard. "Welcome aboard," Lucas said cheerfully, stepping toward the first-class aisle. Brenna didn't move out of the way. She stood in the center of the aisle, blocking his path to seat 3A. She looked him up and down, her eyes lingering on his hoodie, which had a small logo of the Tuskegee Airmen on it. "Boarding pass," Brenna demanded, her hand extended palm up. Lucas handed it to her. "I'm in 3A." Brenna looked at the pass, then looked at Lucas, then looked back at Chad. Chad smirked, leaning against the galley cart. 3A! Brenna said, her voice dripping with skepticism. "This is a first-class seat, sweetie. Economy is past row 8. "I know," Lucas said, his voice steady, but his heart starting to thump. "My dad upgraded me. It's a gift." Brenna let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound devoid of humor. "A gift, right. And I suppose you're a frequent flyer, too." "Actually, I am," Lucas said. "I'm going to the Young Aviators Summit." Chad chimed in, his voice dripping with condescension. "Brenna, maybe he's lost, or maybe he found the ticket on the floor." Lucas felt the heat rise in his cheeks. "My name is on the ticket. Lucas Jackson. You can check your manifest." Brenna stared at him for a long, uncomfortable silence. The line of passengers behind Lucas was starting to build up on the jet bridge. "Just take the seat," Brenna muttered, shoving the ticket back at him, but she didn't move out of the way. Lucas had to squeeze past her, his backpack brushing against her arm. "Watch it," she snapped, dusting off her uniform sleeve as if he were made of dirt. "If you damage the uniform, your parents will be paying for it." "Sorry," Lucas mumbled, though he hadn't done anything wrong. He found seat 3A. It was glorious. Wide leather, a real window view, a pre-flight water bottle waiting for him. He sat down, placing his backpack carefully under the seat in front of him. He pulled out his phone to text his dad. "I made it. The seat is huge." He didn't see Brenna and Chad whispering in the galley, their eyes fixed on him. As the rest of the first-class cabin filled up, the atmosphere shifted. A businessman in a grey suit sat in 3B next to Lucas. He gave Lucas a nod. "Heading out for vacation?" "No, sir. Aviation conference." Lucas beamed. "Impressive," the man said, opening his laptop. But the peace didn't last. As the economy passengers shuffled past, Brenna stood at the front of the cabin, greeting the white passengers with a dazzling, practiced smile. "Welcome back, Mr. Thompson. Good to see you, Mrs. Gable." But every time she looked at Lucas, the smile vanished like a light switch being flicked off. Then the incident began. Lucas, thirsty from the heat in the terminal, reached for the water bottle that was placed on his armrest console. "Don't touch that," a voice barked. Lucas froze. Chad was standing over him. "That water is for paying first-class customers," Chad said, loud enough for the first 5 rows to hear. Lucas blinked. I have a ticket. I am a paying customer." "Upgrades don't count as full fare," Chad lied, snatching the water bottle away. "We need to save these for the Diamond members. You can get a cup of tap water when we're in the air." The businessman next to Lucas looked up confused. "Excuse me, I'm pretty sure the water is for everyone in the cabin." Chad's smile was tight. "Policy, sir. We're running low on stock. Just managing inventory." Lucas felt small. He shrank into his seat, his earlier excitement curdling into shame. He watched as Chad handed a water bottle to a woman in 2A who had just sat down. "Here you go, ma'am," Chad said sweetly. Lucas looked out the window, trying to fight back the stinging tears. Just ignore them, he thought. Dad spent too much money for me to cry. He pulled out his logbook, a notebook where he recorded the registration number, aircraft type, and flight details of every plane he flew on. It was a habit he'd picked up from aviation YouTubers. He noted the tail number N492AA. He was writing down the captain's name, which he'd heard over the PA system, Captain Miller, when Brenna reappeared. "What are you writing?" she demanded. Lucas jumped. "Just my logbook. I track my flights." Brenna snatched the notebook from his hands before he could react. She flipped through it, her eyes narrowing, writing down names, crew details. "Why are you planning something?" "No," Lucas gasped. "It's a hobby. People do it all the time. It looks like surveillance to me, Brenner said, her voice raising an octave, ensuring everyone was looking. In this day and age, we can't be too careful. Why are you recording the crew's movements? I'm not, Lucas pleaded. Please give it back. I'll hold on to this until we land, Brenner said, clutching the notebook against her chest. Or maybe I should give it to the captain. Let him decide if you're a security risk. He's a kid. The businessman in 3B interjected, his voice firmer this time. He's clearly just an aviation fan. Give him his book back. Brenner turned on the businessman, her eyes flashing. Sir, I am responsible for the safety of this aircraft. If I perceive a threat, I act. And a teenager traveling alone, scribbling notes about the crew, is suspicious behavior. Do not interfere with flight crew duties, or you will be removed. The cabin went silent. The threat of removal was the ultimate silencer in modern air travel. The businessman closed his mouth, though he looked furious. He shot Lucas an apologetic look. Lucas sat trembling, his hands gripping his knees. They had taken his water. They had taken his logbook. And they were looking at him like he was a criminal. But Lucas had one thing they didn't know about. Tucked into the side pocket of his seat, hidden by his leg, was his phone. And it was recording. He hadn't started a live stream yet, but he had opened the camera app as soon as Chad took the water. The audio was running. Brenner walked back to the galley, tossing the notebook onto the metal counter with a loud thud. Lucas could hear her voice clearly through the thin curtain. Little thug thinks he owns the place, Brenner whispered to Chad. Probably stole the miles from someone's account. I bet the credit card bounces before we hit Georgia. Should we call the gate? Chad asked, laughing softly. No, Brenner said, and her voice dropped to a sinister, eager whisper. Let's wait until the doors close. Then we can have some fun. If he acts up, we divert. I need some overtime pay anyway. Lucas's blood ran cold. They weren't just mean. They were planning to provoke him. They wanted him to react so they could kick him off. Lucas took a deep breath. He remembered what his uncle, a lawyer, had told him once about dealing with police. Document everything. Stay calm. Never get physical. He slowly lifted his phone. He didn't open Instagram or TikTok. He opened his email app. He began to type a message. Not to his dad. His dad would just worry and couldn't do anything from the ground. Lucas typed a message to the email address he had memorized for his scholarship application, a contact he had met during a Zoom interview just 2 weeks ago. To j.martinez@oig.gov. Subject: urgent. Discrimination on Flight 402. Active incident. Dear Mr. Martinez, I am the scholarship recipient, Lucas Jackson. I am currently on Flight 402 at MIA. The crew has confiscated my property, denied me service provided to white passengers, and I recorded them conspiring to remove me for overtime pay. They are calling me a thug. I am scared. Please help. He hit send. He didn't know if Jose Martinez, a mid-level investigator at the Department of Transportation's Office of Inspector General, would even check his email on a Tuesday. But Lucas didn't have to wait long to find out that he wasn't the only one watching. The aircraft door thumped shut, sealing the cabin in pressurized silence. The distinct whir of the APU auxiliary power unit kicked in, and the air conditioning vents hissed with renewed vigor. For most passengers, this was the moment to relax, kick off their shoes, and hunt for a movie. For Lucas, sitting in 3A, it felt like being locked in a cage with 2 predators circling the perimeter. He kept his head down, staring at his phone screen. He had received an automated reply from the Department of Transportation. Thank you for your submission. Your message has been received. It was a form letter. Cold, impersonal. A sinking feeling settled in his stomach. No one was coming to save him. He was at 30,000 feet, or about to be, and the law up here was whatever Brenner and Chad said it was. The fasten seatbelt sign chimed on. Chad moved through the first-class cabin, doing the final safety check. He walked past the businessman in 3B, smiled, and said, "Sir, could you bring your seat back upright? Thank you." Then he reached Lucas. Lucas's seat was already upright. His tray table was stowed. His bag was under the seat. He was perfect. Chad leaned in his cologne, overpowering a mix of cheap musk and stale tobacco. "Give me the phone," Chad whispered. Lucas looked up, startled. "What? The phone?" Chad repeated, his voice low and menacing. "Electronic devices must be in airplane mode. I need to verify you aren't transmitting signals that could interfere with navigation." "It is in airplane mode," Lucas said, turning the screen to show the little airplane icon in the corner. "See?" Chad snatched the phone out of Lucas's hand. "Hey!" Lucas cried out, instinctively reaching for it. "Don't touch me!" Chad shouted, recoiling as if Lucas had thrown a punch. He played it to the gallery perfectly. He stumbled back against the bulkhead, clutching the phone to his chest, eyes wide with feigned shock. "Captain, we have a situation." The cabin went dead silent. The businessman in 3B lowered his noise-cancelling headphones. "He didn't touch you. He just reached for his phone." "Stay out of this, sir," Brenner barked from the front galley. She had been waiting for this moment. She unbuckled her jump seat strap and marched over. The cockpit door opened. Captain Miller, a man with grey temples and a face lined with exhaustion, stepped out. He looked annoyed to be out of his seat right before pushback. "What is going on back here?" Miller demanded. "We have a slot time to hit." "He lunged at me, Captain," Chad lied, his voice trembling with a performance worthy of an Oscar. "I asked him to turn off his device, he refused, and when I tried to check it for compliance, he took a swing." "I didn't—" Lucas's voice cracked. He was 14, but in that moment, he felt about 6 years old. "I showed him it was in airplane mode. He grabbed it out of my hand. I just wanted it back." Captain Miller looked at Lucas. He saw a black teenager in a hoodie. Then he looked at his crew, his colleagues, people he flew with every week. The bias was unconscious, instant, and devastating. "Son," Captain Miller said, his voice hard, "assaulting a flight crew member is a federal offense. I can have the police waiting for you in Denver, or I can have them drag you off right now in Miami." "Which one do you want? I didn't assault anyone." Lucas pleaded, tears pricking his eyes. "Ask him." He pointed to the businessman in 3B. The captain glanced at the businessman. "The kid is telling the truth, Captain." The businessman said, his voice steady. "Your steward was aggressive. He took the boy's property without cause." Brenner stepped in smoothly, cutting off the defense. "Captain, this passenger in 3B has been disruptive since boarding. He's been undermining crew instructions and encouraging the boys' non-compliance. I believe they might be traveling together." It was a masterstroke of manipulation. By linking the witness to the aggressor, she discredited him. Captain Miller sighed. He didn't have time for an investigation. He had a schedule. "Look," he said, turning back to Lucas. "You sit on your hands. You don't speak to the crew. You don't look at the crew. If I hear one more peep, one more complaint, we turn this plane around. Do you understand?" "Yes, sir," Lucas whispered. "Chad, give him the phone back," Miller ordered. "But keep an eye on him." Chad smirked and dropped the phone into Lucas's lap. "Oops," he muttered, as it slid off his lap and hit the floor. Miller went back into the cockpit. The door clicked shut and locked. Lucas retrieved his phone with shaking hands. He didn't dare unlock it. He didn't dare look up. He felt the eyes of every passenger on him. Some were sympathetic, but most just looked annoyed that he was delaying their flight. Brenner grabbed the interphone PA system. "Ladies and gentlemen, we apologize for the delay caused by a disruptive passenger in the forward cabin. We are now cleared for pushback. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened." She stared directly at Lucas as she said disruptive passenger. The tug pushed the plane back from the gate. The engines spooled up a low whine, rising to a roar. Lucas looked out the window as the terminal building drifted away. He felt a profound sense of isolation. He was trapped in a metal tube at 30,000 feet with people who wanted to hurt him. He thought about the email he sent. Pointless, he thought. Just pointless. But as the plane began its long taxi toward the runway, Brenner wasn't done. She walked past Lucas's seat, leaning in close so only he could hear. "You think you're clever writing in your little notebook," she hissed. "I read it. Captain Miller. And 492AA. You know what we do with spies. We put them on the no-fly list. When we land in Denver, I'm filing a report. You'll never set foot on a plane again. Enjoy the bus, kid." She straightened up and walked away, her hips swaying with satisfaction. Lucas felt like he couldn't breathe. The no-fly list. For writing down tail numbers. It sounded insane, but she seemed so confident. His dream of being a pilot, his scholarship, his future. It was all dissolving because two people decided they didn't like his face. The plane turned onto the taxiway. The safety demonstration played on the screens. Lucas stared blankly at the video, his mind racing. Ding. The flight deck chime sounded. The plane slowed down. Lucas looked out the window. They weren't near the runway yet. They were on a taxiway, but the plane had come to a complete stop. The engines idled down. Silence returned to the cabin. The silence on a plane that isn't moving is heavy. It carries the weight of missed connections and ruined schedules. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is the captain." Miller's voice crackled over the speakers. He sounded confused. Folks, we've just received an order from the tower to hold our position. Not sure what the issue is, might be traffic flow or a paperwork error. We'll update you as soon as we know more." In the galley, Brenner rolled her eyes at Chad. "Probably a bag match issue," she groaned. "Ground crew is incompetent today." "Maybe they realized we have a VIP on board," Chad joked, nodding toward the empty seat in 1A. Lucas sat frozen. He clutched his phone. He noticed he had 1 bar of signal. He refreshed his email. Nothing. 5 minutes passed. The air in the cabin grew stuffy. Then the captain came back on the PA. This time his voice wasn't confused. It was tight, strained. "Folks, flight control has ordered us to return to the gate immediately. We have been instructed that law enforcement needs to board the aircraft to resolve a security issue. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened." A collective groan went through the economy cabin, but in the front galley, Brenner's face lit up like a Christmas tree. She grabbed Chad's arm, her fingernails digging into his uniform sleeve. "They're coming for him," she whispered, her voice trembling with excitement. "I told you the captain must have radioed ahead about the assault." Chad grinned, looking at Lucas. "Oh, this is going to be good. Federal marshals don't play." Brenner marched into the aisle. She didn't even use the PA system. She just projected her voice so the first few rows could hear. "Everyone, please remain calm. We are returning to the gate to remove a security threat. This is for your safety." She looked directly at Lucas. She pointed at him with 2 fingers, then mimicked a pair of handcuffs clicking around her wrists. The businessman in 3B leaned over to Lucas. "Kid, if they arrest you, I'm coming with you. I saw everything. I'll be your witness." "Thanks," Lucas whispered, but his throat was so dry it hurt. He was terrified. Had Brenner really convinced the pilots to call the cops on him? Was he about to be dragged off in handcuffs in front of 100 people? The plane lurched forward, making a sharp U-turn on the tarmac. It taxied back much faster than it had left. As they approached the terminal, Lucas saw flashing lights, blue and red strobes bouncing off the glass of the jet bridge. There wasn't just 1 police car, there were 3, and 2 black SUVs with government plates. "Wow," the businessman murmured. "That's a lot of heat for a cell phone dispute." The plane docked. The seatbelt sign flicked off. "Remain seated," Brenner shouted, asserting her authority. "Nobody stands up until the officers have cleared the aircraft." She stood by the cockpit door, crossing her arms, a smug smile plastered on her face. She was ready for her moment of glory. She was the hero who identified the threat. The cabin door opened. A rush of warm Miami air entered, followed immediately by 4 people. 2 were Miami-Dade police officers, their hands resting near their belts. 1 was a man in a dark suit with an earpiece, clearly an air marshal or federal agent. And the fourth was a man in a rumpled linen shirt, holding a tablet. He looked out of breath like he had run all the way from the parking garage. Brenner stepped forward, beaming. "Officers, thank goodness. The passenger is in 3A. He assaulted a crew member and has been recording security protocols." She pointed an accusatory finger at Lucas. The man in the linen shirt didn't look at Lucas. He looked at Brenner. "Are you Purser Brenner Higgins?" the man asked. "Yes, that's me," Brenner said, confused that they weren't rushing toward the boy. The man looked at his tablet, then at the federal agent in the suit. "And is flight attendant Chad Wilson present?" Chad poked his head out from the galley. "Right here. I'm the victim." The man in the linen shirt stepped into the aisle, blocking Brenner's path to Lucas. He held up a badge that hung around his neck. It wasn't a police badge. It was the gold eagle of the Department of Transportation. "I am Senior Special Agent Jose Martinez, Office of the Inspector General," the man announced, his voice carrying to the back of the plane. "I am issuing a federal stop order on this flight." Brenner's smile faltered. "A stop order?" "For the boy." Martinez ignored her. He turned to the captain, who was standing in the cockpit doorway, looking bewildered. "Captain Miller?" Martinez asked. "Yes." "Captain, I have received credible evidence of a violation of 49 U.S. Code Section 40,127, Prohibitions on Discrimination, specifically racial discrimination and the falsification of a federal security report by your crew." The color drained from Brenner's face. It happened so fast, she looked like she might faint. "What?" Brenner squeaked. Martinez turned to Lucas. "Mr. Jackson." Lucas stood up, his legs shaking. "Yes, sir." "Did you send me an email 12 minutes ago with an audio file attached?" "Yes, sir," Lucas said. I didn't think you'd get it so fast. I have a filter for keywords like crew conspiracy and OIG." Martinez said, a small, grim smile touching his lips. "And I happened to be in the terminal conducting a random audit on American Eagle maintenance logs." Martinez held up his tablet. He pressed play. The audio was crystal clear. The cabin was silent, so everyone heard it. "Little thug thinks he owns the place. I bet the credit card bounces before we hit Georgia. Should we call the gate? No. Let's wait until the doors close. Then we can have some fun. If he acts up, we divert. I need some overtime pay anyway. The recording ended. The silence in the cabin was heavier than before. It was the silence of absolute shock. The businessmen in 3B started laughing. It was a loud, barking laugh of pure vindication. Overtime pay. They diverted for overtime pay. Brenner looked at the captain. Captain, that's taken out of context. We were joking. It was galley talk. Captain Miller's face went from confused to purple with rage. He looked at Brenner with a gaze that could have melted steel. You lied to me, he hissed. You told me he assaulted Chad. You told me he was a threat. You used me to false report a federal incident. Captain, Quiet, Miller snapped. Agent Martinez stepped closer to Brenner and Chad. Brenner Higgins, Chad Wilson. I am detaining you both for questioning regarding conspiracy to violate civil rights and interference with flight crew members, specifically manipulating the pilot in command with false information. Chad's knees actually buckled. He grabbed the galley counter to stay upright. Arrested, but I have a date tonight. Cancel it, the police officer said, stepping forward with handcuffs. Wait, Brenner screamed as the officer grabbed her wrist. You can't do this. I have seniority. He's just a kid. He's lying. The recording isn't lying, ma'am, the officer said, spinning her around. Click, click. The sound of handcuffs, ratcheting tight, echoed through the first-class cabin. Lucas watched wide-eyed. He wasn't smiling. He was too in shock to smile. He just watched as the two people who had made him feel like garbage for the last hour were marched down the aisle past the very economy passengers they had tried to impress. You're making a mistake, Brenner shrieked as they dragged her onto the jet bridge. I'll sue the FAA. Martinez watched them go, then turned back to the captain. Captain Miller, this flight is cancelled. You have no cabin crew. I understand, Miller said, rubbing his temples. He looked at Lucas. Son, Miller struggled for words. He realized he had been a pawn. He realized he had almost arrested an innocent boy because he blindly trusted the white adults in the uniform. I owe you an apology, Miller said, his voice thick with shame. A big one. It's okay, Lucas said softly. No, Martinez interrupted. It's not okay, and it's not over. He looked at Lucas. Grab your bag, Lucas. We need to take a statement. And don't worry about the Aviators Summit. I'll make sure you get there. Lucas grabbed his backpack. He grabbed his logbook, which was still sitting on the counter where Brenner had left it. As he walked off the plane, the businessman in 3B stood up and started clapping. Then the lady in 2A joined in. Then the people in economy, who had heard the commotion and the shouting, started clapping too. Lucas walked down the jet bridge, the applause following him. But as he entered the terminal, he realized the nightmare wasn't over. It was just changing shape. Because Brenner Higgins wasn't just a flight attendant. She was the sister of a very powerful man in Miami, a city councilman named Robert Higgins, who hated bad press and hated federal interference even more. And while Brenner sat in a holding cell, she was already making her one phone call. The holding room at Miami International Airport was nothing like the first-class cabin. It was a windowless box with beige walls, fluorescent lights that hummed like angry bees, and a metal table bolted to the floor. Lucas sat at the table, a can of Sprite in front of him. Agent Martinez was typing furiously on his tablet. My dad is freaking out, Lucas said, his voice quiet. He saw the news ticker at work. It says, security breach at MIA involving minor. He thinks I'm going to jail. You are not going to jail, Lucas, Martinez said without looking up. You are the witness. Actually, you're the whistleblower. The door flew open. It wasn't a police officer. It was a man in a navy blue suit that cost more than Lucas's dad made in a year. He had silver hair, a deep tan, and a smile that looked like it was carved out of marble. He was followed by two younger men in suits carrying briefcases. This was Councilman Robert Higgins. He was a fixture in Miami politics, the kind of man who cut ribbons on new highways and had dinner with the chief of police. Agent Martinez, Higgins boomed his voice, filling the small room. I wasn't aware the Department of Transportation was in the business of kidnapping children. Martinez stood up slowly. Councilman Higgins, I wasn't aware city council members had jurisdiction over federal aviation investigations. I have jurisdiction over the well-being of my constituents, Higgins countered, stepping into the room. He looked at Lucas not with kindness, but with a cold, calculating assessment. And my sister Brenna is a constituent. You have her in a cell like a common criminal. She committed a federal crime, Councilman. Martinez said, his voice hard. We have the audio. You have a recording made illegally by a minor without consent. Higgins shot back. He turned to one of his lawyers. Florida is a two-party consent state, is it not? It is, sir, the lawyer chirped. That recording is inadmissible in state court, and frankly, obtaining it violated the privacy rights of the crew. Lucas felt his stomach drop. They were going to twist it. They were going to make him the bad guy for catching them. Higgins leaned down, placing his hands on the table, invading Lucas's space. Son, listen to me. You're young. You made a mistake. You got confused about the rules, you got scared, and you tried to get a hard-working woman in trouble. If you sign a statement admitting that you misunderstood the situation, that you were perhaps a bit emotional, we can make all this go away. I'll even pay for your flight to Denver. First class. Real first class. Don't answer him, Lucas, Martinez warned. I'm trying to help him, Higgins shouted, dropping the friendly act. Because if this goes to the press the way you want it to, Agent, I will destroy this kid. I will paint him as a delinquent, a security risk, a troublemaker who hates authority. Do you want that attached to your name? Lucas, do you want every flight school in the country to Google your name and see security threat? Lucas trembled. The threat was specific and terrifying. It attacked the one thing he cared about, his future in aviation. I didn't misunderstood, Lucas stammered. She called me a thug. She used a colloquialism. Higgins waved his hand dismissively. She was stressed. Do you know how hard flight attendants work? And you, a 14-year-old, think you can ruin a 20-year career because your feelings got hurt? That is enough. Martinez stepped between Higgins and Lucas. Councilman, get out. This is a federal interview. If you intimidate this witness one more time, I will add obstruction of justice to the charge sheet, and I won't care who your golf buddies are. Higgins straightened his tie. He stared at Martinez with pure venom. You're playing a dangerous game, Jose. You're a mid-level bureaucrat. I run this city. Higgins looked at Lucas one last time. Smart kids know when to fold, son. Be smart. He turned and marched out his legal team, trailing behind him like ducklings. Martinez exhaled a long breath. He looked worried. Is he right? Lucas asked, his voice barely a whisper. Can he ruin my record? Martinez sat down. He can try. He's going to go to the media. He's going to sin this. We need to be ready. Martinez was right. Within an hour, the narrative began to shift. On the airport TV in the waiting area, a local news channel was running a breaking news banner. Chaos in the skies. Veteran flight attendant detained after altercation with unruly teen. The anchor, a woman with stiff hair, was reading a statement from Councilman Higgins' office. Brenna Higgins, a decorated flight attendant with a spotless record, was taken into custody today after a misunderstanding with a passenger who refused to follow safety instructions. Sources say the passenger, a minor, was recording the crew surreptitiously, a violation of airline policy. They didn't mention the racial slurs. They didn't mention the overtime pay conspiracy. They made it sound like Lucas was a brat who wouldn't turn off his phone. Lucas watched the screen, tears streaming down his face. They're lying. Everyone believes them. Not everyone, Martinez said, checking his phone. Remember the man in 3B, Mr. Sterling, whose full name turned out to be Richard Sterling, the CEO of a tech logistics company, was not the kind of man who let bullies win. He had spent the last 2 hours in the airport lounge, not drinking champagne, but editing video. He hadn't just watched the incident. He had been on a video call with his business partner when the commotion started, and he had kept the line open. His laptop camera sitting on his tray table had captured a wide angle of the entire cabin. It captured Chad snatching the water. It captured Brenna's aggression. It captured the businessman defending Lucas. Sterling didn't go to the police. He knew how slow that would be. He went to Twitter X and TikTok. He uploaded the video with the caption, "I was in seat 3B. This is what really happened on Flight 402 at American Eagle at FAA. This crew needs to be fired. The kid is a hero. Hashtag Flight 402. Hashtag Justice for Lucas." Because Sterling had 50,000 followers in the tech world, the video didn't crawl, it sprinted. Views 10 minutes, 5,000, 30 minutes, 100, 50,000 1 hour, 2.3 million. By the time Lucas and Martinez walked out of the interrogation room, the world had changed. Martinez's phone started buzzing incessantly. "Lucas," he said, showing him the screen. "Look." The video was everywhere. But it wasn't just the video. It was the comments. "That flight attendant is a monster. Look at how she talks to him. The kid was so polite, he just wanted his water. I know that flight attendant Brenna Higgins. She was rude to my grandmother last year. The spotless record Councilman Higgins had bragged about was unraveling in real time. People were replying to the thread with their own horror stories about Brenna. At Travel Girl 99, OMG, that's Brenna. She kicked me off a flight in 2022 because my baby was crying. She said I was a bad mother. She's evil. At Pilot Dave, I flew with Chad Wilson once, lazy and arrogant. Not surprised he lied to the captain. The internet detectives were working faster than the FBI. They found photos of Brenna at the councilman's fundraisers. They found Chad's Instagram, where he bragged about easy shifts and messing with passengers. Then the major news networks picked it up. CNN ran a segment, "Viral Video Contradicts Official Narrative in Miami Airport Incident." They played Lucas's audio recording side by side with Sterling's video. The synchronization was damning. You could see Brenna smiling in the galley, while her voice on the audio conspired to fake a security threat. Back in the councilman's office, the mood had shifted from arrogant to panicked. Robert Higgins was screaming into his phone. "Kill the story. Tell the station manager. I'll pull the city advertising budget." "What do you mean it's on TikTok?" "I don't care about TikTok. Buy it, delete it." "But you can't delete the internet." At the airport, Martinez received a call. He listened, nodded, and smiled for the first time that day. "Lucas," Martinez said, That was the United States Attorney for the Southern District of Florida. They saw the Sterling video. They aren't just charging them with interference. They are adding conspiracy to deprive civil rights under color of law. What does that mean? Lucas asked. It means, Martinez said, that because they used their authority as a flight crew, which is a federal position of trust to target you based on race, they are looking at serious prison time. Not just a fine. Prison. And the councilman? Lucas asked. The councilman just lost his leverage, Martinez said. In fact, I think he's about to have a very bad press conference. Just then Lucas's phone rang. It was his dad. Lucas! David's voice was frantic, then relieved. Lucas, are you okay? I'm at the airport. I'm at the ticket counter. They're telling me you're a hero. People are shaking my hand. Lucas smiled. The weight on his chest finally lifted. I'm okay, Dad. I'm with Agent Martinez. I think we won. But the karma wasn't done yet. The legal system moves slow, but the corporate world moves fast when stock prices are at risk. The airline's CEO issued a statement, just as Lucas met his dad at the security exit. We are horrified by the actions of the crew on Flight 402. The employment of Brenna Higgins and Chad Wilson has been terminated effective immediately. We are launching a full internal audit of our hiring practices. Furthermore, we would like to offer Mr. Lucas Jackson a full scholarship to the flight school of his choice to ensure he returns to the skies where he belongs. Lucas hugged his dad, burying his face in his father's grease-stained work shirt. I did it, Dad. I didn't let them win. You sure didn't, David said, holding him tight. But the story had one final twist. The councilman wasn't going down without a dirty fight. He decided to hold a press conference that very evening, intending to blame the airline, blame the training, blame everyone but his sister. He didn't know that Agent Martinez had one more piece of evidence, something he had found in Brenna's confiscated phone. The City Hall press briefing room was packed. Councilman Robert Higgins stood behind a podium that bristled with microphones. He looked every inch the statesman, American flag pin on his lapel, sympathetic furrow in his brow, hands gripping the wood with practiced gravity. My fellow citizens, Higgins began, his voice smooth as silk. Today my family has been the victim of a rush to judgment. My sister Brenna, a dedicated servant of the skies, was placed in an impossible situation. We believe that once the full context is revealed, it will be clear that she was following standard safety protocols regarding non-compliant passengers. The Department of Transportation's aggressive actions today are nothing short of political theater. He paused for effect. The flashbulbs popped. He was controlling the narrative. He was winning. At the back of the room, Agent Martinez stood next to a U.S. Marshal. He held his phone, watching the live stream of the speech that was happening 50 feet away. He's good, the Marshal whispered. He almost sounds like he believes it. He won't believe this, Martinez said. He tapped a button on his phone. Martinez hadn't just confiscated Brenna's phone for contacts. He had imaged the drive. And deep in the deleted folder of her messaging app, the messages she had frantically tried to scrub while sitting in the holding cell was a conversation time-stamped to the exact moment the plane was taxiing. But it wasn't just Brenna talking to herself. She had been texting her brother. Martinez nodded to a reporter in the front row, an investigative journalist named Sarah Jenkins, whom he had briefed 5 minutes ago. Jenkins raised her hand. Councilman. Yes, Ms. Jenkins, Higgins said, pointing to her benevolently. Councilman, you stated you were unaware of the incident until after the arrest. Is that correct? Absolutely, Higgins lied without blinking. I learned of it when the station manager called me. Jenkins looked at her phone. Then can you explain a text message sent from your personal number to Brenner Higgins at 2:14 p.m. today? The message reads, "If he's a problem, kick him off. Use the security threat excuse. I'll make sure the police report disappears. Just don't delay the flight. I have donors flying in." The room went deathly silent. Higgins froze. His mouth opened slightly, but no sound came out. The color drained from his face, leaving him looking gray and sickly. I don't know what you're referring to," Higgins stammered, sweat instantly beading on his forehead. "We have the screenshot, Councilman," Jenkins pressed, holding up her tablet. "It was recovered from your sister's phone by federal investigators. Did you conspire to falsify a police report to protect your sister's schedule?" The press pool erupted. "Councilman, did you order the removal?" "Councilman, are you obstructing a federal investigation?" "Councilman." Higgins backed away from the podium. "This press conference is over. No further questions." He turned to flee through the side door, but the door opened before he could reach it. Agent Martinez stepped through, followed by 2 FBI agents. "Robert Higgins," Martinez said, his voice cutting through the cacophony of shouting reporters. "Please stop right there." Higgins stopped. He looked at the cameras, then at Martinez, then at the handcuffs dangling from the FBI agent's belt. "You can't do this here," Higgins hissed. "I'm a councilman." "Not anymore," Martinez said. "You're a suspect in a federal conspiracy case. We have the texts, Robert. We have the phone records. You authorized the false reporting of a crime." As the FBI agents moved in, the cameras zoomed in. The image of the untouchable Robert Higgins being handcuffed on live television was beamed into living rooms across Miami and to the waiting area of the airport where Lucas and his dad were watching. "He knew," Lucas whispered, watching the screen. "He told her to do it. And he got caught," David said, a fierce pride in his voice. "They all got caught. The karma wasn't just hitting, it was an avalanche. Within hours, the governor of Florida announced the suspension of Councilman Higgins pending an investigation. The law firm representing the airline dropped Brenner as a client, citing gross misconduct. Chad, who had been trying to cut a plea deal by blaming Brenner, found out that his own texts mocking the passengers had been leaked by a former friend, destroying his credibility. The power that Brenner thought she had, the family connections, the seniority, the ability to bully without consequence, had evaporated. She was sitting in a federal detention center, and for the first time in her life, no one was coming to bail her out. 6 months later. The federal courthouse in Miami was quiet. The sensationalism of the media circus had faded, leaving only the cold, hard reality of the law. Lucas sat in the front row wearing a new suit. His dad sat next to him holding his hand. Judge Alicia Thorne looked down from the bench. She didn't look amused. "Brenner Higgins," the judge said, "you abused a position of authority entrusted to you by the public. You used racial bias to weaponize law enforcement against a child, and you attempted to cover it up with the help of a corrupt official. This court finds no leniency appropriate." Brenner stood in her orange jumpsuit, weeping. She looked older, frailer. The arrogance was gone, replaced by the hollow look of someone who had lost everything. "I sentence you to 36 months in federal prison, followed by 3 years of supervised release. You are permanently banned from employment in the aviation industry." Chad Wilson received 18 months. Robert Higgins, who had pled guilty to avoid a longer sentence for corruption, was already serving 5 years in a minimum security facility in Pensacola. As the gavel banged, Lucas didn't feel a surge of joy. He just felt peace. The monster under the bed was gone. The people who tried to make him feel small were now smaller than he would ever be. Lucas walked out of the courthouse and into the bright Florida sunshine. Agent Martinez was waiting for him by the steps. "You did good, kid," Martinez said, shaking Lucas's hand. "Most adults wouldn't have handled that as well as you did." "I just wanted to go to the summit," Lucas smiled. "Speaking of which," Martinez said, handing him an envelope, "I think you have a flight to catch." Inside the envelope was a ticket, but it wasn't for American Eagle. It was a charter ticket. "Mr. Sterling, the guy from seat 3B, he called me," Martinez explained. "He owns a Gulfstream G650. He's flying to Denver for a business meeting. He wants to know if you and your dad want a lift. He says the co-pilot seat is open." Lucas's jaw dropped. A Gulfstream G650. The Rolls-Royce of the skies. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious." Martinez grinned. "And don't worry, the crew on this one knows exactly who you are. You're the VIP. The G650 climbed out of Miami like a rocket, soaring far above the commercial lanes. The ride was smooth as glass. Lucas sat in the cockpit jump seat, a special seat for observers, a headset over his ears. The captain, a former Air Force pilot named Captain Reynolds, turned to him. "You ever flown one of these, Lucas?" "Only on Microsoft Flight Simulator, sir," Lucas said, his eyes wide, as he scanned the digital avionics. "Well," Reynolds said, disengaging the autopilot, "simulators are great, but nothing beats the real thing. Your aircraft, Lucas." Lucas hesitated. "Mine, yours. Put your hands on the yoke. Gentle now." Lucas reached out. He felt the vibration of the engines, the power of the air over the wings. He looked out the window at the horizon, a curved line of blue meeting the darkness of space. He wasn't the boy in seat 3A anymore. He wasn't the thug Brenner tried to paint him as. He wasn't a victim. He was flying. He banked the plane gently to the left, watching the world. "Tilt also," on his command. Back in the cabin, David watched his son through the open cockpit door. He took a sip of real champagne, poured by a flight attendant who treated him like royalty, and wiped a tear from his eye. They had tried to ground his boy. They had tried to clip his wings, but all they had done was clear the runway for him to take off. Lucas looked at the altimeter. 45,000 feet. He was higher than they could ever reach. Lucas Jackson didn't just win a lawsuit. He won his future. And the crew of Flight 402 learned the hard way, that when you try to bury the truth, sometimes you're just digging your own grave. It's a powerful reminder. Never underestimate someone just because of how they look or how young they are. You never know who's watching or who they might become. If you enjoyed this story of justice served cold and soaring high, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories where the underdog bites back and karma delivers the final blow, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell. Let me know in the comments. What would you have done if you were in seat 3B? I'll see you in the next video.